Brodie, thank you so much for inviting me here today to have a look at your studio and everything else. And also we're so grateful for you basically allowing us to show your wonderful chair at this exhibition. It was the one piece I really wanted to put in the show because it's so beautifully married or bridged the design bit with the craft bit, and I just knew we had to have it. So thank you for that.
No problem. You're welcome.
And yeah, I've basically come here just to ask you a few questions. They're not too in-depth questions, so don't worry.
Sure.
But first of all, you are Tasmanian.
Correct,
Is that correct?
yes,
Does
yeah.
that mean you were actually born in Tasmania? And you grew up
born,
there?
raised, and educated.
Yeah.
Until I moved to the United States to do my master's. So.
Right. And while you were growing up in Tasmania, I mean, I grew up on an island. I grew up in Jersey, actually. I spent a lot of time, because when you're on an island, there's a lot of coast. And I mean, was that your sort of thing in Tasmania? Did you have a lot of exposure to nature and that sort of thing? Yeah. And how formative was that on what you're doing now?
Well, very much so. We grew up in Hobart, a small city, which is part of a big kind of estuary of rivers and waterways. So you're very much surrounded by the harbour and all of the nautical features that come with that. So that's been a big continuing influence throughout my career. But the city is very much kind of fringed and flanked by just dense green wilderness. Yeah. So it's an amazing place where you could be submerged in a rainforest within about 15 minutes or at the beach within 10. So it was an amazing place to grow up.
Yeah. And as a child, did you spend lots of time on a beach sort of picking up stones and that sort of thing? Or
yeah,
yes,
and still
did.
Do. And rock pools and kind of, kind of collecting shells, all types of things.
Yeah. I have a theory that when children do that, if you are lucky enough to grow up in an environment like that, and you sort of become a sort of pebble searcher on a beach, it actually tunes your eye very, very well. I've come across several designers who've had equally the same sort of childhood background, and they've always got great eyes for design. And I'm sure it's because you're training your eye from just the earliest age.
Yeah. To really treasure hunt through the kind of...
the sift through the stuff.
All nature's wonders.
Yeah. And so tell me, did you come from a family that had a design and art background or not?
Not specifically. My grandfather was an engineer. Actually grew up... he was born and raised here in the UK and kind of immigrated out to Australia after the war. So maybe some of that kind of problem solving kind of physics kind of comes from his side. And actually we have a lot of his tools here in the workshop still, so it's still tried and true and kind of fit for purpose and so on. But I think I was very much exposed to the arts. My mother used to take me to a lot of exhibitions and encourage drawing and painting and sculpture and all those types of things. The design bit kind of came in through my own kind of exploration, more as a kind of teenager.
Right.
And I was just making furniture in the family shed, from whatever I could find.
Yeah. And when did you sort of think, okay, I'm going to have a career in design? But did you have like a eureka moment, or was it a more gradual thing?
There's probably been a few smaller eureka moments along the way, but I guess the first one was I was fortunate that passion that was very much kind of like private at home, and also maybe through kind of high school as well, design technology classes, all that type of stuff, and art. That I took that passion into university. Tasmania is an island that has a lot of wild native indigenous trees that are just perfect for boat building and furniture making and so on. So there's a real craft movement that's come off the back of that.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate to attend a local university which had the Tasmanian School of Art, which had the furniture design program, which was very expressive, almost in that kind of studio furniture maker, designer maker kind of model. I was very fortunate to kind of study through there, which is really kind of the backbone to a lot of stuff that we do.
And what was your final piece, your final degree piece at the University of Tasmania? What did you make?
It was a bowl, a vessel, which was designed against a brief to create it's going to sound quite strange, it was a flat pack bowl vessel, because the reason was there was the University of Tasmania was invited to partake in an exhibition in Saint Etienne in France, and everything needed a flat pack in order to travel that vast distance. So anyway, there was this very elaborate kind of bowl, which is a feat of engineering and also I guess both craftsmanship and this mixed material of two different sizes, and it was this amazing expressive, almost like a nautilus shell, with the repetition of this kind of almost kind of ratio fractal form.
So very similar to actually how you've progressed.
Still the same DNA, really.
Yeah. Interesting. And so after the University of Tasmania, you went on to do a master's at the Rhode Island School of Design, which is, a hugely prestigious institution. What made you go there? I mean, a lot of people would have maybe gone to the Royal College of Art, or they'd have gone somewhere else. What made you choose going to Rhode Island?
It was probably the similarity in the programs. I mentioned before that kind of designer makers, studio furniture maker, which is more of an American kind of term. So they, excuse the pun, but kind of dovetailed in quite kind of well together. And I at the time, I wanted to kind of, as a young man, I wanted to kind of tread a different kind of path. A lot of people in my family had kind of come to London, so I wanted to kind of take a different direction, even though I ended out here in the long run. But so I moved to North America. Like, I knew nobody in the whole continent, let alone the whole country, or Rhode Island, or even Providence. But it was an amazing experience, and what that enabled. I had come from a very small kind of institution, very focused on doing that expressive kind of form. And then when I arrived in Providence at RISD, I knew that I kind of had this ability, this confidence of being able to make things and experiment with things. But what RISD gave me was this extension of the imagination, which was the digital arts.
This was what I was going to ask you. So that was the key thing, was basically exposing you to the digital aspect that was presumably only just emerging by then, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had a little bit of it from the University of Tasmania through animation programs, but this was, just kind of, let's say, just blew it out of the water. This was like digital architecture, designing shapes and forms without any physical kind of restraints of physics and limitations. We did projects where we partnered with Brown University in virtual reality caves and things like that, which, it seems all a bit dated now, but, at the time were extremely kind of cutting edge. And that's really given us extension of the imagination, as I said, the extension of the hand to be able to get complexities of form and processes. And ever since, it's just been this hand-in-hand, yin-yang ratio of those two worlds.
Well, it's always technology that drives design. It's materials and technology. New materials and new technologies always drive design, because it gives you that extra palette of things to play with.
Of course.
And for sure, with your work, that's so detectable. I mean, you definitely have an inquiring, curious mind, and presumably that being at Rhode Island really helped with that. And so as a fledgling designer, did you have an idea of how you were going to plot your path, or were you did you do the sort of normal rite of passage internships with anyone?
You mentioned earlier those kind of, turning points. And I guess it was early on when I arrived at the University of Tasmania and I kind of understood, hey, well, this is not just a hobby. This is an international career. This could take me around the world. This could open experiences and so on. And I learnt that fairly early on, as I guess I might have been 18, and then it's just been with just complete dedication, kind of focused on that ever since. And then when at RISD, I really wanted to kind of focus on that more, European industrial designer kind of thing. So I really set myself upon Milan and the Salon Satellite to kind of achieve that. I did internships in Tasmania with architects, which were
very useful.
Believe it or not, still circling kind of back in through my career as collaborators. And certain experiences in the United States. But it was that Salon Satellite that I really wanted, which is the young designers platform.
And when was the first time did you go there first, or did you go there and show?
I went there first with RISD, who exhibited, I think that must have been 2003, and then went back independently or with a colleague who also graduated from RISD.
And that was in 2005,
That was in 2005, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. And that same year, you made the momentous decision to move to London. Was that because London at that stage was you viewed as sort of the epicenter of design action, or?
Certainly felt that way. I was living in America, and obviously I'd had that kind of foundation there. I was traveling to Milan. I would stop in London. I would kind of stay with friends and get out there and see, what was kind of going on from the fashion to the architecture to the art and design and everything. And it did really feel, and certainly in some ways still is, the epicenter of those kind of creative fields. So,
and that same year, you also set up your own design company, which. How old were you? I mean, that was you must have been pretty young to do that.
I must have been about 24, 25. Yeah. The fortunate thing was, from the Salon Satellite, I had attracted the attention of certain brands. Kundalini was one of them. There were some others.
Yeah.
And we had started relationships, and I designed a piece that was launched in 2006 as part of their 15-year exhibition of lighting. Yeah. And I was a young designer then, and we had your work exhibited next to Norman Foster and Zaya did, so that was kind of a bit of a a moment there to kind of really arrive. I was quite fortunate to get that so early on, and then it's just kind of snowballed from there, and then that's when we obviously did key pieces like the E-turn bench with them. It was these designs really kind of came at that very kind of fruitful, just arrived in London, kind of finding the roots moments.
And so after doing, say, work with Kundalini, what other manufacturers did you work with at that stage?
We've done work with a company called Domodynamica and another one called Riva 1920, which we still do work with today, the solid wood company. But there was always this kind of parallel where we wanted to do design for production, but also the limited edition, which is kind of almost like this kind of natural kind of almost home space for me, which is, kind of art.
And do you find that the sort of studio limited edition pieces often will then feed into production pieces?
And vice versa, yeah. I think there's probably been a little bit of a kind of leveling in a way with technology. You used to have kind of, some quite high advanced technologies and materials used to go into limited editions, but now they are available within those production pieces.
Yeah. So. Interesting. And in terms of your sort of overall work, there's almost three distinct categories. There's your production pieces, there's your commissions, and then there's the limited edition pieces. And I was just wondering, what are the sort of communalities over those, but also what are the differences working in those three areas?
Well, there's a lot of kind of crossing over. Sometimes commissions can become limited editions and kind of vice versa. What you mentioned earlier, some production items might have a limited edition variant. But sometimes it is, quite different hats. You've kind of got to shift your thinking a little bit. Production has obviously got to look at serial kind of manufacturing and how you're going to do that. We don't do too much in the kind of mass manufacture, so it's kind of batch manufacture. So we find that in kind of contemporary times, a lot more fluid and dynamic to where we really need to be. Whereas the limited editions continue to grow and grow in kind of stature. And commissions have become a big thing in the last few years, where people want variations of quite special pieces.
Well, it's always that they want something special for themselves. But then don't we all? And in 2013, you set up Made in Ratio, which is basically your own furniture production company. And was it very important for you to have control over production? Because then you can set the quality.
Yes.
You can basically be your own boss. Was that something that you'd always wanted to do, or?
It kind of yes and no. I certainly wasn't really wanting to kind of be a control freak of it all, but it started from more of a kind of back to basics for me, really, because I was working with the galleries, I was working with the likes of Quintolini and stuff, and designing work, and that was all great. Obviously, there was the financial crash of 2008 when things really kind of mellowed. Certainly for some kind of the younger kind of upstart guys like myself then. And I really wanted to return to a more hands-on kind of thing. I wanted to be part of that design process. There's a lot of design that goes on in the prototyping or in the experimentation. It's not simply just drawing on napkins and kind of,
They don't birth themselves spontaneously, do they?
So I really kind of wanted that. We were also getting contacted by a lot of, magazines, journalists, books, publications, etc., projects for things. So we didn't actually have anything tangible. So Made in Ratio, which probably really started to kind of take shape from 2011 onwards, was born in
And so the first piece you did was the Carrie shell. And what was the reaction to that? Were you was it an instant reaction? Because it was very different from anything I think most people had seen.
It was a big kind of moment, not only to launch a design as significant as that, but also the collection that it was part of, but the brand as well. So it was that kind of three-way kind of surge. It was a big undertaking.
Sorry to interrupt you. How long did it actually take you from design concept to actually getting that carry chair done? Because it's really difficult to bend wood like that. It really is. The stress is unbelievable.
So it started off as a kind of form experimentation, probably with just paper. If you think of the template of it, it's basically like a mask with an eye kind of socket kind of cut out of it, folded almost like a double fold, like a fortune cookie. So experimented this in paper, in ply, in aeroply, and so on. We used processes where we 3D scanned it using this, what would be kind of obsolete now, but it was basically a whole series of DSLR cameras that would take photos from every angle. This is what you could do on your iPhone nowadays. But this was a technology that was used for like sports characters in computer games. But we would get those ergonomics, and then we would kind of work on that. We knew that the stresses of the wood were achievable, so that when we went to factories to talk to them, they didn't think you were crazy.
They didn't laugh at you.
No. So we kind of we had that kind of step, but there were many iterations. So I think, to get back to your kind of question, I think it probably took a good 12 to 18 months to really get that kind of product. What we showed in Milan was still a prototype. We didn't actually really launch the production version that is more known today until the London Design Festival, which would have been the same year in 2013.
Right, okay. And there are three major themes within your work. There's the inspiration of nature, the use of recycled materials, and the use of state-of-the-art digital technologies we've been talking about. Which of your designs do you think expresses the fusion of those best? I know that's a really tough one.
Yeah, they all do, really. Like, I suppose, obviously, we spoke about the cowrie shell. Obviously, it's got its natural inspiration, the concave cavities of the cowrie shell. It's taken a lot of hands-on experimentation, and I mentioned the digital processes. It may not appear like that. There are other designs that we have that probably have where the digital processors are a little bit more kind of prevalent. Even things like the gyro table, which is the ocean plastic pieces. Of course, the Atchair, with its fluidity.
Yes.
And that wouldn't be possible without some state-of-the-art digital modelling. Not even to mention some of the processes that go into the actual fabrication. So yeah, there's lots.
And are you actually very computer savvy, or do you have people working for you who are computer savvy?
I would like to think of myself as quite computer savvy. Like the creation of a lot of the forms is still myself, and that kind of arcs back to some of those animation programs and tools, the fluid forms that were only used to be possible using some of these kind of
sort of Maya or something,
basically in that way. It was the one that we used, Cinema 4D, but very, very similar to Maya. Nowadays they're all a bit kind of the same, but there were many years that some were a little bit more hard CAD and others were a little bit more kind of fluid dynamics, and getting them to kind of partner up has always been difficult.
And you use a lot of different recycled materials in your work. I've just been upstairs in your studio and seen all sorts of wonderful designs with various different recycled materials, and the one that really struck me is your use of basically fishing net, recycled fishing net. Tell me why it's so important for you to do something with recycled materials like that. I mean, is it that you want to highlight the issues? Obviously, but it's how you, it's almost like it's a rhetoric being built into your design. You're expressing yourself through the material choice that you're using, and actually saying, this is something we really need to think about. Would you agree with that? And why is it because of growing up in Tasmania and being surrounded by water that the ocean and ocean plastic is such a strong theme in your work?
Yeah, maybe there's an affinity to the natural environment and to the waterways and to that pristine wildlife that we would love to kind of protect. But yeah, I think there's a material, as a designer, as somebody who kind of creates things and makes things. We have a material choice at every time that you're kind of at that fork in the road, which way are you going to take? And I think that if there is a material story, it just adds that kind of layer for us. And I think none of the designs are the holy grail. None of them are the kind of the golden bullet that's going to kind of stop ocean plastic from happening. It is literally shining a light to a possibility, an alternative, in the form of the gyro table with the million fragments of ocean plastic. It is putting people face to face with
the reality,
with a big issue. The fishing nets really, to me, is that is an ultimate kind of problem. They're wreaking extreme damage by literally drifting across, scraping coral reefs and choking sea life and coastlines and so on. And I've literally last month returned from Arnhem Land, which is in the north of Australia, the Gulf of Carpentaria. We're working with a team of people to really look at the problem there and seeing what we can kind of do and
actually, in a way, through your design, you're highlighting these really big issues, but in such a poetic and beautiful way. And it's sort of, in a way, it's these terrible problems, but you make it look so beautiful.
We're trying not to kind of disconnect people from these kind of issues. There's so much kind of like shocking facts and figures fed to us, through the media. Like somebody might read, that there's more plastic in the sea than fish, and they're just like, well, what can I do? I'm completely powerless to it. But then if you actually almost kind of show these objects, almost objects of hope, to then show that they can actually be an alternative.
That's really interesting that you said hope, because Vivienne Westwood, who was a a real eco warrior, a fashion eco warrior, let's put it that way. And she said, if you don't have hope when you're talking about these things, it's really difficult. And it is to sort of project that hope that actually there are ways of, changing the consciousness actually of people and getting people to think about things on a more deep level when it comes to environmental, I think is really key. Because I think, as you say, there's so much, devastating information out there that in some ways you can understand why some people just say, oh, it's all going, we're going to hell in a handbasket. It's
all too much.
It's all too much, and I'll just have another duvet day. But actually having that hope and actually making, drawing a spotlight onto some really difficult thing, but in a very poetic way, I think is actually very special. And I think you're one of the only designers actually doing that at this present moment. So respect.
Thank you.
And of all the materials that you've used, what are the most creatively challenging? Like, what material have you used, recycled material you've used, that you've actually found quite difficult to I mean, is it like the recycled ocean plastic and its stability, or?
Yeah, it would definitely be the ocean plastic, because obviously we do a lot of work with reclaimed woods, which are a little bit more straightforward. They're not without their problems because of the depths that we need to go to kind of salvage those. Recycled metals are a little bit more kind of commonplace and common practice, so that's a little bit more very obvious. But yeah, no, the ocean plastic, I think it's the scale of it. It is gigantic in its effect, but minuscule in the tiny little culprits. Yeah. And it's how do we kind of capture all that? Well, how do we keep it within a closed loop circular kind of system, and not have it where it's just ending up in the environment at the moment. So it's infiltrating nature in very hard to get places. For example, where I was in the Gulf of Carpentaria recently, access into there is extremely difficult. So how are you going to get these tons of ocean plastic from there to wherever it could be?
It's even in the Marianas Trench. I mean, it's unreal. Yes. It's the whole watercourse, the whole way down the ocean.
So then even if you do get it, then how do you then kind of process it from there? So it is a great unknown, and it's a highly complex issue. Yeah. And you can't point the finger either, like the culprits or the source is everywhere, and I think we all need to obviously.
I know. I think we've also become so reliant on plastics. The modern world is a plastic world, and but actually there are better ways of doing it, because if you actually look at, say, our grandparents' generation, milk came in bottles.
Exactly.
And actually there was very little plastic. And so I think...
Paper bags.
I know. So it's not like we really need so much plastic in our lives. And I think a lot of it is, it's oil companies trying to sell more oil.
It is one of the biggest issues is the sheer cost of how cheap virgin plastic is. Yeah. So even if you're trying to compete recycled plastic against virgin plastic, you're behind the eight ball to begin with before you've even done anything, because of the costs that you're up against. So you're working with
such a huge cost. I mean, there's the money cost of the actual economics of it, but actually it's not taking into account the environmental cost, which the cleanup is huge.
Of course, and that's easily 10-12-fold.
Yeah. So you very kindly have loaned your chair to Court Barnes Museum, the Creative Circle. And I was just wondering, first of all, what made you choose that name? What was the original sort of design thinking behind it? And how does it fit into the ongoing design sustainability debate as well, which obviously this exhibition is focused on?
So the art chair originated in a series that I was designing in that very kind of fruitful kind of period when I first moved to London. And it was designed as a closed loop, a single gesture to entirely encompass the functionality of a chair. So within that, almost the fluidity and the expression of a signature as a maker's mark. So there was that idea, very much kind of pushing the 3D modeling and what was kind of possible.
And the single use, single material, single unity of a piece too, which has always been a key theme.
Idea. Obviously working in with the theme of the exhibition, and, the creative circle, but also the closed, literally a closed loop is the design. The name, the Atchair, came from a very digital, it almost kind of references the at symbol, so it has a very digital kind of presence in that regard. But yeah, really tried to capture that full essence and functionality of a chair, which is a complex kind of structure as far as the loads and so on, and as well as an icon. To literally encompass that all within that complete gesture.
Great. And what's it made out of?
Stainless steel, which is one of the most infinitely recyclable, circular materials going around.
I know. So it will look as good in 100 years.
Well, taking good care of it, and a good polish.
Great. And very last question. With the ongoing sort of march of AI within the design arena, how do you see the evolution of design over, say, the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to be hugely affected by AI? And also, with the increasing digitalization of design, do you think that people are actually wanting to engage a lot with more craft values in a way? Because life has become so digitized that actually they do want the maker's, the fingerprint of the maker on it.
The maker's mind. I think people are really going to seek those kind of in real life kind of experiences. And hopefully there's a lot of crafts, kind of ancient and kind of contemporary, that will kind of continue. So on. I see AI as an amazing extension of the imagination. We use it as a bit of a kind of scrapbook, kind of soundboard to kind of play around with ideas. I think it's got still a long way to kind of go, but I think that it's something that we kind of use kind of hand in hand within our kind of processes, and it will become more so. But yeah, we're fascinated about how do we make that transition from the digital realm into the physical realm, and what can value add to a design in that making process. So that's where the work sits.
Okay, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for all your time and for showing me around. And it's been a slice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.